morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I'm the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to IT Basics for Business, a breakfast seminar series that provides a forum to gain useful do-it-yourself IT solutions and insightful, actionable tips. I want to begin by thanking Uprise Partners for their continued support, allowing us to bring you this virtual event series yet again this season. This morning's event is the final installment of IT Basics for Business for the 2024-25 event season. This four-part bi-monthly series runs October through June each season. How the season has just flown by. Today's topic, Back to the Future of Disaster Recovery, Strategies to Future-Proof Your Business, is presented by Brian Gagnon, Chief Technology Officer of Uprise Partners. Uprise Partners is our presenting sponsor of IT Basics for Business since its inception, and I believe we're currently in our third season. At this time, now I'd like to introduce Uprise Partners CEO Melinda Gagnon to the floor to tell us a little bit more about the work that Uprise Partners does.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Good morning, everybody. I want to just take a moment to tell you a little bit about Uprise Partners. We're here to help businesses optimize and maintain their technology. So our specialty is in full service IT and cybersecurity. And we're headquartered right here in Maine. About a third of our team is here in Maine. And we serve customers here as well as across the US and Europe. We've been fortunate to receive a few accolades in the last few years. This year, we were recognized as Propel's Business of the Year. Last year, we were noted as the second fastest growing IT and cybersecurity provider in the US, and that was out of 35,000 of our peers. Last year, we were also named to the Tech Elite 250 list by CRN. And for 5 years running, they've also recognized us as one of the top 100 security firms in North America and among the top 500 managed service providers in North America. So we're very happy to receive those nods. And it's really because we're very focused on our mission. So we're here to help businesses grow by enabling them to fully use the power of technology. It doesn't matter what business we're in. We all need technology to do what we do better and more efficiently. We focus exclusively on small and medium-sized businesses. And it's our view that these businesses need our help the most, and they also make the biggest impact. They're the most significant job creators in our state and our country. So part of that, and what we also really received a note about when we won our Business of the Year award, is our commitment to Maine and growing in Maine. And we wanted to really double down on our support of Maine-based businesses. We have many customers here now. We'd like to help more. So we have an initiative underway that we call our Backyard Initiative. We have a comprehensive IT offering for Maine-based businesses to ensure that they can get the IT support that they need. And we want to continue to push that forward to help support Maine's economy and workforce. So if you want to speak with us or know anyone who may be able to use our help, please reach out. We'd absolutely love to speak with you. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melinda. Thank you for your support of this series and your support of Maine's business community and beyond. Like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free, will be recorded, and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page, sign up for our weekly email newsletter, and follow us on socials while you're there. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance our virtual events here at the Chamber. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for Brian today, you can type them in the YouTube chat. I will relay questions to Brian at the conclusion of his presentation, where we'll save some time for more of a formal Q&A session. Now, a bit more about this morning's presenter. Brian Gagnon is a technologist with over 25 years of experience building, scaling, and optimizing business ecosystems. In addition to his role as Chief Technology Officer at Uprise Partners, he has served as the Head of Global Systems Engineering at HGST Western Digital and was a global architect at VMware, and has also built and led several tech companies. He specializes in cybersecurity, technology infrastructure design, public-private and hybrid cloud architecture, data management practices, and data science platforms. Brian is also a mentor at Techstars and Mass Challenge. And when he's not busy with technology challenges, you can actually find him outdoors scuba diving, hiking, or fishing. So we're very grateful to have him here with us this morning. And with that, I will hand the mic right over to Brian. Brian, take it away.
Thank you. Well, hopefully it's not too hot for everybody today. And hopefully you have a good AC system for any of your computers and all that so that they stay healthy, just like me being in the AC. So anyhow, to kick this off, this is something I've talked a lot about in my career because it's just really a key thing, right? And disaster recovery is often one of those things that a lot of people don't wake up in the morning and say, we should probably spend a lot more money on disaster recovery today. I usually find that this is something that happens after an event. That tends to be a driver where people say, we can't let this happen again, or, this really crimped our style. But anyhow, with all that being said, today we're going to talk about the strategies and how to future-proof some of your stuff. And there's one caveat with that. This is not a set it and forget it. This is not Ron Popeil's rotisserie chicken, right? This is something that you need to continuously update and revise over time. So I want to just say that for the starting, if the only thing you listen to and then you drone out and drink coffee the rest of the time, that's okay. Just remember that you don't just set and forget a disaster recovery plan. It's something that needs to be refreshed over time. So with that being said, let's dive in. So today's agenda, we're going to recap the last webinar a little bit. We're going to go over some real world DR solutions and things that you need to put in a playbook, things that you need to think about when you're building this, and really starting to set priorities. Most people that I know, even the biggest of companies, can't just go and create a disaster recovery plan from start to finish for every single thing in their organization, right? So let's build some priorities. Also, let's stay away from some of the pitfalls. There's definitely pitfalls. There's places that you can waste and spend a lot of money on things that don't bring meaning to what you're trying to accomplish. And then making sure the DR and compliance work together, right? Compliance being the, hey, we don't want our data to go somewhere we don't expect it to go, or we don't want somebody to share things they shouldn't, or we need to follow some level of compliance, whether it be HIPAA or any number of compliance attributes, right? And then last, we'll go through a couple stories that we have seen over time, and then really what the road ahead looks like. So let's dive in. So when we think about how do you redefine the practice of disaster recovery and business continuity, I think this is always a good place to start, because I think these terms, we live in the IT industry. Even IT couldn't just say information technology. They had to abbreviate themselves. Thanks, guys. But these are types of things that we stay away from, right? So when we say disaster recovery, what does that mean in relation to continuing the business in the event that something unplanned goes on? So I look at it as there's a couple things that really matter, and one of which is resilience. So I like to think of a business, forget about IT. If you were just running a lemonade stand, and that lemonade stand, basically interfaced with clients and exchanged money and exchanged lemonade, right? If you just think about those things, what's resilience look like? Well, resilience might be, hey, I've got a Square scanner on my phone and people can like tap and they can pay that way. They can pay with cash. They can pay with any number of means. But what happens if the internet goes down? What happens if the phone service goes down? How can you still get, revenue? And then more importantly, how can you order more lemonade? How can you do a number of these things that you have to do to like be in business? So when we think about resilience, that's why it matters, right? We need to be able to like move fast with the times and scale up, scale down, all of that. When we think about a business continuity plan, I've talked about this a number of times. Business continuity planning is how do you move fast, right? It's not just saying, hey, we need to be resilient. That sounds great. You have to actually have a plan for that, right? And one of the things there is if you're in Florida or you're in some place where there's a lot of storms, which actually happens to be Maine as well, having a plan for having fuel for your generator, having things like that, having a generator, right? These are the types of things from a business continuity plan that get enacted when there's something that affects continuity and resilience. And then when we think about disaster recovery plan, that's what happens after the snowstorm already swept through, right? It's how do we get stuff back to normal? How do we get, how do we recover from the natural disaster? And that's what we talked about in the last series, but you'll also see this, like this is deeply seated in this as well. So, and then the last piece is how do we get started? Well, this today, I'm going to hopefully get everybody started with this and give you some things that you all by yourself without an IT professional can at least make, a couple quick lists and get started. So let's dive in. So also you can see our back to the future theme. I really wanted to put some new numbers in here. These are the originals. So that's just what we're stuck with. So that's where we're at. When we look at DR and why it still matters in 2025, this is not something that AI can fix. This is not something that all kinds of software can fix. It actually takes quite a bit of time to like put some of this together. And some of it is just making business decisions. So when we look at this and like, why does this still matter? 60% of companies that don't have a DR plan and get a cyber attack or something like that tend to close after about 6 months time frame. And this is like worst case scenario. This is somebody that doesn't have any DR plan, any plan probably whatsoever. I hear this a lot. Hey, we haven't been attacked. I don't think we need any virus. Or hey, we haven't been attacked. I don't think we need to upgrade our firewall. I actually in 2025 still hear these things on the regular basis, right? And that's tough to educate through. So when we think about that, and then we think about what happens with people that maybe just don't have a DR plan, many of those close within about 12 months. So a very vast majority of people that don't have a plan don't get the privilege to stay open as a business. So just something to think about. It's not scare tactics. You can go out and see these numbers all over the place. So when we think about this, let's start putting together what's a real life, real world DR playbook look like. Plan, playbook, however you want to call it. I like playbook because I think the most important thing with a plan is that you use it, right? You run the plays, you practice the plays, and you're prepared. So when I think about the key components and the things that you as an organization should think about, you want to know and you want to document what are the roles and responsibilities? What are the different things that somebody in your organization is going to need to do in the playbook? And what I would say is, let's forget about IT for just a second. Let's forget about an IT organization or something better like that. If you have that, let's just say, what is the sales leader or the person in charge of sales? What are they going to do? What are we going to tell customers if they call, right? What's our plan for these things? Having somebody that is the head of that and having somebody that responsibilities wise is in charge of that makes it so that we're not just like shouting plans into the air that aren't getting met, right? So having that stuff written down, having it documented, and revisiting it regularly to make sure that all of the different roles are met and the responsibilities are covered is really, really key. If you can help it, you don't really want to be picking like the quarterback at game time, right? So that's a big piece. Having communication plan, right? Having everybody's information in a place where you can get to the information even if the internet is down. A vast majority of outages we have in Maine tend to be network outages, right? And not network outages that are planned. They're ones where a tree falls over the pole, somebody has an accident and hits a fiber pillar in the road, side of the road. Any of those types of things, they happen quite a bit, right? And so having a good communication plan so that any person knows who to contact that's going to be in charge of this, and they're going to be the incident commander for the length of the project, the length of the problem, right? That is typically how a real world disaster recovery playbook looks like, right? And then practicing it, right? Making sure that you test the escalation paths, making sure that we know what happens if Joe, the IT guy, happens to be on a cruise and it just happens to hit at the worst possible time. Who covers for him? How does it look when you can't reach somebody? How does communications happen? How do things like if you have some regulatory, if you're hacked or whatever, you need to let certain organizations know what's going on, especially if people's public information is out there, right? So these are things that you should have the plan, test the plan, and when you get more sophisticated, try and see what happens if you break the plan. Somebody that is on the list isn't there or what have you, or something doesn't work. You plan on the generator doesn't start up. What does the plan look like when you purposefully break the plan? Because what you might find out is, hey, we might need to rethink the plan, because a lot of this is very contingent on, let's say, Microsoft Teams. We use Teams, pretty extensively for a lot of our communications, but we have a plan that if Teams goes down, which it tends to happen at least once or twice a month at this point, it's very popular, right? How do I get numbers? How do I call the person that's like running the plan? Well, we have all that stuff printed out for a reason. Test the plan, practice the plan, test the schedule, test everything, right? The more you test stuff more regularly, the better you're going to be prepared if you need to use the plan. So, and then the next piece is, as you're going through the plan, you might say, hey, I need a little bit of help with this, or I need some guidance on how to think about this. There's a lot of good frameworks and tools that are out there that are free. NIST is a really good one. National Institute of Science and Technology. They build some really good security frameworks and plans. You can go on their website. I think it's nist.gov. And in there, if you search disaster recovery or business continuity, you'll find a lot of good free information. I would say it's not always written like the easiest, so it gives you a good start. So don't get overwhelmed. Companies like us, this is also what we specialize in. So if this is something that you need help with, always happy to help. And so then if we think about frameworks and tools, good place to start. This also gives you like a roadmap, right, that you can follow. It's not to say you go through it and you make it exactly how they made it, right? You may need to adjust some things, but that's key. That gives you a great starting point. Then that allows you to get into automation and DR orchestration. So one of the really nice parts about things that are improving in the IT space, automation is huge. So when you think about a DR playbook and plan, you really want the rigor of following the steps. So if you're testing on the regular, you might want to make an orchestration where you simplify some things. So maybe you have to hit the red button that starts the automation, but once that's hit, a bunch of things happen. Maybe it double checks the backups. Maybe you double check the last time we had a valid test. You double check a bunch of these things. You fail over, the generator comes up, the backup internet goes on. All these types of things. A lot of these things can be automated, at least in the testing phases, if not in the phase when you have to implement them. So that's some things to think about as you're thinking about the strategy. This is always a good question. So what to protect first? Like I was saying when we started, you can't create a backup and recovery or disaster recovery plan that covers everything all at once. It takes some companies years to get through this. So when you think about it, and this is where everybody, even the non-IT folks in the room, right? Think about this. We got to figure out, what is the business impact? How does a problem, a specific problem, how does that impact business? Is it really critical if Teams goes down, for instance, or some other cloud application? Or can you still service your customers? What happens if your support desk goes down? Does that cause it so that customers can't dial in? Maybe you have a backup where they just call a phone number so you can keep things moving. Maybe it's not as good or as efficient as you'd like it, but at least it's something, right? So getting the impact analysis and also figuring out, hey, if we have a business where, let's say we ship food around the state, right? We're a distributor company. The trucks need to get loaded up at a certain point in the day. Well, based on that, we kind of know when that line is where we can make all of the stops and we know what the time is. If we're going to miss that time, what is the impact of that, first of all? And then secondly, how much should we put into protecting against that impact, right? This is like a really helpful one. If you look at something and you have a business process, for instance, like the trucks have to go out at 3 p.m., let's just say, to get all of the locations in the state before the next day when people need stuff. And we know that that costs X amount of money. We may say, okay, if that happens like 2 hours in a row, that's a sizable amount of money. We want to invest at least that much money into improving our process, right? And improving our recovery, and how we deal with a disaster. So those are good things to think about. Those are things that everybody in the room, whether an IT person, a finance person, or somebody just, in the business doing their role in the business, everybody has a role in this. So think about it that way. Think about what the impact is and figure out, is this something that we really need? Because you really want to identify the most critical stuff first and then work your way down to the things that just aren't as critical. You might find email really isn't a part of the day when it comes to servicing your customers. But when you get to the second day that there's an outage, maybe you need to approve new orders or something like that. That might come in via email. You might also figure out, hey, if that's down, they can call us with that rather than use email. So that might be a way that you factor around email as being something that you critically need to back up. So just a couple things to think about. Next, when we think about and start to really plan the business impact, two terms that you'll see, again, IT doing IT things and making things complicated with making acronyms. Recovery time objective. So recovery time objective is simply this: how long can something wait before we get something back up and running that's critical? So that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, we need to go back in time, to a certain point. That is a recovery point objective. But if you think about, hey, we're running a library, okay, and we need 2 books, Tom Sawyer. Tom Sawyer is really popular. And so we need 2 copies, one so that if somebody has taken one out, there's another copy. But the second is, what happens if somebody loses that? What happens if we need to, plan because the sprinklers went off at the library? Now, the simple thing is, hey, there might be another nearby library that has Tom Sawyer. We can refer people there. That takes time. Another piece of that is, hey, we have a second and third copy. They're probably all out at different people's houses. We might need to wait 2 weeks for those copies to come back, but at least we have like additional copies that might not have gotten wet. So that might not be fast enough, though. We might need to recover quicker and get the books back to lend them back out, just as an example. That is recovery point objective. How quickly can we go back to a certain point in time and have 3 books again, right? We have a vendor, right? And we can go on Amazon and we can click next. We got it right in the cart, or we have something really quick. It's going to be here the next day. That is how quickly, how quickly can we get back to 3 books? The next part is, how quickly does it take? What's the time objective? We know it's probably going to, best case, be here tomorrow with shipping, or maybe we go to the Portland Public Library and borrow a copy from them for 2 weeks or whatever. Just an example. Recovery point objective, recovery time objective. Both good things to know about all of the key things in your environment. This is also why I say, hey, really focus on the things that are key, because as you can see, the amount of work starts adding up when you start thinking about recovery point and recovery times for all of the key things. You really want to do this for the most critical stuff and probably not spend your time on the things that aren't inside that critical space. So that is definitely something to think about. When you move to the next step, right, this is actually a great chart for setting, basically priorities, right? And so when you think about impact, priorities, and urgency, is it a priority 1? So it needs like an immediate, right? This is a good little chart to go through, and you could do this with Post-it notes and a wall, right? Make these categories and go through and literally put on the Post-it note, email system, slap it up there. Is it immediate? Is it high? Is it moderate? And what I would say is, you're going to probably go through this exercise and you might end up moving the Post-its. So don't get the really, permanent stick ones, because you're probably going to move this around if you do this right. This is like the Marie Kondo of IT, right? Do you really love this? Are you going to need this in the future, right? If anybody has done that, that's always a fun one. I highly suggest you give that a try. So there might be a band t-shirt from 1996 that doesn't make the cut, but it's low, right? And it's not critical. So when you think about this, though, you want to be thinking about, hey, is our enterprise resource planning platform, Is that immediate, or can we still operate the business for a period of time? Right. And that's where business time objective comes in, because you might say, hey, look, we could be down for like a day. If it's not worse than a day, we're going to be okay. We got a plan. After a day, we really have to make sure that that is up and going. So that's why I say go through this and start to like post-it note out what's critical, what's immediate, and start there and then work your way. And you might find that the stuff that's P4, maybe you never want to have a plan for that. Maybe you just say, hey, listen, there's an emergency, and you use communications to basically say, hey, in the event of an emergency, there's unprecedented times. We're not worried about our website or our social media, just as an example. But we're really concerned about customer support. We're really concerned about making sure we can order more stuff, making sure that the warehouse has enough stuff to kind of bridge the gap, and all of those type of things, right? So that's why this matrix really can help you. And like I said, pick a wall in a conference room, get some Post-its, jot the concepts of what could get you on those, and start sticking them. And then go through it again and say, is this really critical? Is email really critical? Let's think about that. Is the website really critical to doing what we need to do? Maybe the answer is it's marginal, or it's moderate, right? So now this is the part that I see a lot, right? Set it and forget it. We sort of started with that. Business continuity and resiliency is not set it and forget it. This is like saying, hey, I put smoke detectors in my house when I first got there. And yeah, sure, I put a battery in, but like I don't test them. It's been 12 years. Most smoke detectors like start failing at 10 years. Whatever, I don't test them. They'll probably be there because I put in smoke detectors once, right? I hear this a lot about firewalls. I hear this a lot about endpoint security and a number of things. Don't just set it and forget it. You've got to go back and refresh and make sure that it meets the current times. Things change too. Like this is a very dynamic world that we live in. I just sent out a note, Monday, right, to our team. It wasn't a scare tactic. It's, hey, some things in the world have changed very quickly, right? And that could cause cyber attacks. That could cause a whole number of things, right? So be diligent and let's make sure we know what our plans are. Let's test our plans. Let's do all of those things. Good prudence, right? So be testing your plans. Be making sure you don't have false confidence. Do not set it and forget it. These are really critical things. The next piece, overlooking third-party stuff and cloud dependencies. When you go through the list, right, and you say, hey, here are all the things that are in the P1 category, right, highly critical, highly important. Go through and go to the next step. What does this depend on? It might be, hey, here's our support application. Well, does that run? Where does that run? It runs out in the cloud. What cloud is it on? Microsoft, Amazon, Google, you name it, their own cloud. Find out, ask questions. Hey, what cloud is this on? Whenever you're using a provider that is not inside your data center or inside your corporation, you should ask these questions, right? This is stuff that we go through. We do regular testing, for instance. Our service desk software is what our whole company runs on, right? This is somebody calls, we're having a problem. How do we help the problem? ... Some of that is in the cloud. Some of that also is really critical and isn't in the cloud. I don't want to go into too many details, but we have a plan for what happens if the cloud goes away, if the internet goes away. All those types of things is really, really critical. So these are things to not overlook. Don't overlook. Just because you put something in the cloud doesn't mean it's magic. The cloud is not magic. I'm here to report. You still have to do DR. You still have to have a plan. You still have to set things up. And, that was early on, maybe 2007 timeframe. The cloud was just really getting going. Everybody swore. I mean, in my career, I've heard this is the next thing a million times at this point in IT. Everybody, all the marketing folks sometimes want to go to, here is the next latest, greatest thing. What I would say is the mainframe is still a pretty important tool to banks, trains, freight companies, things like that. Everybody had the mainframe for dead 20 years ago. It's not. Like if you go to JetBlue's website, a lot of that scheduling, a lot of the stuff that actually runs the planes and gives the weights and measures and all of that stuff, and that runs the really complicated schedules, runs really well in like a mainframe thing. That has dependencies. Everything has dependencies. The cloud has dependencies. You got to know what they are. So, and then the last piece is, failing to align your business. Like, somebody's business may have changed. That just happens. If the DR plan doesn't change with the business, you might be protecting the wrong things. You might be spending time and money to keep things updated and practiced and all of that. And that might not be the critical part of the business anymore, So these are things that just stay away from these things. Just if there's one thing you remember in the whole presentation, set it and forget it. Only works for chicken with the Ronco rotisserie chicken thing. Hopefully I'm not dating myself. But with that being said, that's the only place that works. It does not work with IT. It does not work with resilience or business continuity. So set it once and then make sure you keep adapting it and set a schedule that you regularly test things, you regularly review things, you regularly look at dependencies and make sure there aren't new dependencies, and then really make sure that it still aligns with what your mission is and that it hasn't changed. So next piece, and this one's pretty important. Some of us have mandates, right? There are controls or frameworks that mandate things. HIPAA is a pretty good one. SOC 2, also pretty good one. That is, the accounting principles of how a lot of this, finances, data, you name it, get protected. These are some of the things that if you fall under one of these, you need to do these prescriptions. It's not a nice to have, it's a mandatory to have. So if you're doing, for instance, backups for HIPAA, so you're a hospital or something touching, private history of information. If you are doing any of that stuff, that is mandated. It has to be encrypted. It has to be nightly, and it has to be like a full backup. So, and it has to be not just encrypted in motion. It has to be encrypted when it finally gets there at rest. So these are just some of the things, right? You have to test a couple times a year. SOC 2, there's unannounced tests. There's quarterly reviews for ISO 27001. That's probably the more stringent of the three. Some manufacturers, some people that are in the gov space need to follow that. Any one of these is going to make it better than probably what you're doing all by yourself. But these are mandates. So make sure you know what the core mandates are so that you incorporated that into the plan, so that you're not making a plan and then when you go and get HIPAA audited, they say, oh, wait a minute, you're not following this. There's no reason if you've made a plan that you shouldn't incorporate these things, because at that point you're already doing the hard part. Make sure you don't go all the way to the end and you didn't put your name on the paper, right? You turn in your homework and somebody else gets credit for it. Make sure you know what the mandates are that you need to follow and that you're following them. So there's some good software packages to dive into this more, but they'll take way longer than I have to talk. So that's key. Ransomware. Ransomware is not fun. I could tell you that. If you haven't had it, it's probably a matter of time before you run into it. These are getting really, really sophisticated, right? Things that work and things that don't work, right? Immutable backups. What does that mean? It means that you write it once, you read it many times. So you make a backup copy, nobody can change that. It's immutable, right? That's really helpful. That makes it so that you can at least get back to a point in time, back to the backup before something bad happened. Making sure you have an incident response plan. That's also key to put in place right away. Making sure that you've got the network segmented so that if somebody gets into your organization, they aren't supposed to be there, they can't just run a piece of software and literally hit everything in the organization. Making sure you do those DR drills and tests, right? Things that don't work with ransomware, making sure you have delayed detection. I was asked a few weeks back, CMM was having some issues. I didn't get into too much detail because, I don't think it's always helpful to tell a reporter exactly what they want to hear. I said simply, hey, kind of looks like they had a good plan. Let's move on. They're working on their plan, whatever they told you, what have you, right? The thing that I saw, right, and the reason I can even say that without being on all of CMM's communications or Central Maine Healthcare was that I could see how they were communicating. I could see they had a plan, that they were following the script. And that right there is a big part of the piece. They also detected stuff really fast, right? That's really key. They communicated really well, right? Sure, it's not great to lose people's data. It's worse than that, actually. But with that being said, sometimes having a plan is how do you recover from things and how do you get back to normal, right? So that is stuff that if you don't have those, it doesn't work very well. If you have those, it definitely works, right? When you think about what changes after these types of events, people get 24/7 managed detection and remediation, right? That's Uprise does that. That's what we do, right? We also make sure that there's escalation, right? This stuff never or rarely happens at 9 o'clock on a Monday. It happens at 3 a.m. when everybody is sleeping, right? And that's kind of par for the course. So having a good after hours coverage plan, having a plan that maybe has some things automated in that time that shuts some stuff off. I am also a big fan, right? This is cultural. Making sure that everybody in your culture also knows that, hey, if something is off, general state is going to be, we shut it off. If we don't know what's going on, we shut it off. I would rather explain to a company, and this being maybe your boss, right? I would rather explain to somebody that out of the abundance of caution, we shut something off to figure out what was going on, and we escalated it, and we're looking at it and making sure that indeed we're in a better place than we think, right? So these are some things to think about, right? The scene where I actually really wanted to be the scene where Michael J. Fox was trying to plug the two cables together in front of the clock, but I didn't have enough time. So when you think about what are the outcomes of some of this, right? It's how long did it take, right? Oh, 3 hours. They figured it out in 3 hours. We got a customer back and going in 3 hours. What did they lose? maybe they lost 15 minutes of data. In that 15 minutes, we either have to go back and, recreate it from other data. It has to be recommitted or whatever. At the end of the day, this is what this looks like, right? These are what the results look like. This is a far cry. Losing 15 minutes of data is a far cry from losing a whole day's worth of information, right? That might be a game ender, right? So definitely things to think about. When we think of stuff like an office flood, right? This is nice. Hey, some good communication happened. There's a lot of cloud-based stuff. That's actually good, right? If you think of an office flood, that is going to be something that is very localized, right? If you have the flood in the office because the fire suppression pipe broke and it floods your server room, if your server room is in the cloud, that's not going to hit you at that point. You may have some other problems locally, but the bulk of your critical stuff is somewhere else. Laptops over desktops. Hey, flooding is happening on the 3rd floor. Grab your laptops and head home, right? This is something that we've all become accustomed to in the world of the past of COVID. A lot of people just said, hey, we got laptops. We're grabbing them and we're going home, right? That works, right? That's a way to solve things. Sending out a message right away and keeping customers and business partners up to date on what's going on. I could tell you information is power, and letting people know what's going on and why you're having an issue. A lot of times the general thought is, hey, don't tell anybody anything and hopefully nobody notices. That's rarely a good way to go about it. When we think about what didn't work, well, hey, there was a file server that had everybody's tax returns on it. Why wasn't that in the cloud, right? That's something that maybe needs to be in the cloud, but maybe they have some security concerns. So what I would say is the cloud is just a medium. It's just a room in the sky that you can put things in. You still have to secure it. You still have to have a plan. You still have to have all those things. At this point, almost anything can go in the cloud. It just needs to be architected. It doesn't, the cloud also doesn't mean that it's cheap, right? That's the other thing. Yes, there's some aspects where it might be cheaper. You're getting the benefits that you don't have to pay for the whole thing, right? The other piece, no remote access to tax software. Everybody takes their laptops and goes home, but there's some stuff that's just at the office that's probably going to bite you at some point, right? And paper dependencies. In some worlds, paper dependencies are actually a good thing, but when you're reliant on those, or it might be the only copy, there is no other copies of things, that doesn't work very well. If it's part of your strategy, it's part of your strategy. You have a plan for it. That's good, right? So, and then what changed from the flood, and afterwards, there's some good things, there's some not good things, right? File storage in the cloud, that's great. Making sure that, you picked accounting tools that are cloud-based, great. Paperless, great if it fits your initiative, And I say that you might want to keep a copy somewhere, that might be part of your initiative, but you don't want that to be your sole copy. So with that being said, these are all things you just need to test, and make sure that you don't run into the middle column, right? So when we think of results and takeaways of how this worked, right? Clients weren't upset. They totally were communicated with. They understand that maybe there was a leak or something. They understand that the most important stuff was backed up in the cloud. Maybe some of those files were also backed up, even if they were local. That was really good. Maybe you need to spend $22,000, right, to get some of this stuff back or to change it around. But the nice part with that is we got some productivity gains, right? Disaster recovery and business continuity can also be looked at when you're doing your business impact analysis. Don't just look at this as a negative, because sometimes this could be an impetus to drive productivity gains, and you might actually pay for a good portion of what you're trying to do. So just a different way to think about it, and how to get started, right? Start with saying, hey, we need a DR plan. I know that sounds simple. Start there. Make that a top priority and figure that out. Like I said, business impact analysis and that matrix. Put the matrix on the wall. Don't get fancy. You don't need a new piece of software for this. Take Post-it notes, write specific business things on a Post-it note and categorize them. P1 all the way down to P nothing, right? That's really good. And then conduct a tabletop exercise. So put all those things together, start to flesh out your plan and how long things can be down. And now literally put some time aside where you test it and you say things like, the internet is down. Now what do we do? Oh, we go over here. What does that mean? Do we have backup internet? We don't. We didn't choose that. Okay. Are we still going to be able to meet our needs with one internet, right? These are the types of things that tabletop exercises, this is really key. And then next and last, right? Schedule a DR readiness test with us, right? We're happy to go through this from the high level all the way down to the, hey, just do it for us, right? Help you do it for you, do it with you, right? Those are 3 ways that we typically help people. If you're not comfortable with it, that's fine. We can do a good portion of this. One thing I would say, do it for you. Do it for you, us or any IT professional. There is a place that only you know how important the things of your business are, right? An IT person can't just they can, but you don't want them to. You don't want them to just make up what's the most important in your business. You have that knowledge. It's really important. It's why you started your business. It's why you run your business, all of that. So think about those types of things. With that being said, good luck. Nobody disappeared from the picture. So I think we're having a good weekday here in summer. What questions do we have?
Thank you so much, Brian. That was awesome. Love the Back to the Future theme throughout and your background.
Be better if it moved, but that's okay.
Looks like Maiden Events has a question here. If a major outage or cyber attack hit your business today, what would be the first system you'd need back online, and how long could you afford to wait?
Great question. I like this. It's like good thinking. So this is one I would love everybody to think about this. You can think to yourself, you can write it, that's fine. I would say personally for Uprise, if we were to lose our ability to communicate with our customers, that'd be a pretty big one, right? So phone system, that's pretty important. Our service desk software, that's pretty important. And then probably information after that. Should be where we store all the information. So that's how I would think about it. That would not be a let's wait over an hour. So that would have a recovery time objective to an hour. That's a very short RTO, by the way. Oh, I got to put a nickel in the jar. So I used an acronym. So let's see. Next question. When was the last time you tested your DR plan? Or if ever? Smart ass. So with that being said, great question though. you should always be testing this at least on the half year, if not once a year at the latest. You should test it probably depending on what your needs are. Things might change. Things might be really highly critical. You might have really expensive business impact, right? Based on those things, that may dictate how quickly you want to test it. You may also have some mandates from HIPAA, SOC, ISO, right? So based on that, you might need to test it more often. You might want to test it more often. So that's a great question. All right. What's the last time you tested? Boom.
There's one
Okay.
here.
Yep. How confident are you in third-party vendors or cloud services? This is a great question. What I would say to that is you should make a primary list of all the software that you use. It might be Teams, it might be whatever. Is it local? Is it in the cloud? Then the next question is, what cloud is it in? Right? What dependencies are there? In knowing all those dependencies, you start to have a map of what happens if these things go down, right? Had a customer yesterday. Hey, we have this really critical presentation we're doing. It seems like Microsoft Teams keeps kicking us out, right? There's something up with our network. We go in, we look, everything looks fast and fine. We go out to some of the stuff on the internet where you can see what Microsoft is doing. We see that they're having massive problems yesterday around like 11 to 1, massive problems. So there is a point where like we can only do so much with the IT stuff. Make sure that you know with third-party vendors, if there are things that are business critical and you're using things that are in the cloud or with a third party or what have you, what can you do? What do you have for options if something goes down, right? Because it might not always be in your control. So I think that is really critical. So that's what I got. Any other questions? No is an okay answer.
Well, I have a selfish chamber question, I guess, while I have you here. One of the questions was about like, when was the last time you tested your disaster recovery plan? And that got me thinking, like, this is probably a very broad question, but like, how often is a standard time period to, like, is it like once per fiscal year, or depending on whether you're a nonprofit or like what type of information you're retaining within your systems? How often would you recommend a nonprofit who holds membership related information to do a disaster recovery test?
I would say it depends on how critical the data is and like what pieces of it. But the other piece to that is, I would say at a bare minimum, I would always test your plan at least twice a year. Once maybe at the beginning of the year, once in the middle somewhere, like about nowish. I think that's probably a good safe bet. I would definitely want to understand more about what is the criticality, how does it affect, revenue, how does it affect service, how does it affect all of those types of things, because you might find out that, hey, this is really critical, and if this goes down for any period of time, even though we have a disaster recovery plan, we might need to test this more often, because there are points where, let me equate it to flying, right? How often would you want to have the pilots go out and do a walk around to make sure that everything with the plane is okay. Me personally, I'm cool if they go out every single time and get their shoes dirty and walk around the plane and make sure that everything is good.
Yeah.
One might say, hey, once a year is good, okay, but like I'm cool if they walk around every time. That might not be practical for every single thing. They might not be able to, there are things in a plane check, right, or an engine check. They X-ray parts of the engine. That stuff takes weeks upon months, and it's like a minimum of 6 figures every time they do it. Those are things that are like built in to the checks of the plane. They basically make that check. It's every couple of years or every so many hours or whatever. That just doesn't make sense to check it that often. They build in some of the disaster recovery to that. That's why you have 2 engines, for instance. That's why you have something else. They build into the system places where there is defined tolerance, right? They plan on an engine going out. They plan on a tire blowing out, because these are just things you can't always plan for when they happen, even if you have a plan. You got to test the plan. You got to test your, standard operating procedures, all that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, it does. I know we can have an outside conversation about that in greater depth.
Anytime.
But I really appreciate you taking the time with us this morning to run through these things. Tough things to talk about, and sometimes there's some fear involved. But the best way we can quell that fear is by having plans in place.
So never be fearful of this type of stuff, because it's the thing that ultimately keeps your business resilient. So, in closing,
exactly. Yeah.
Have a great couple hot days.
Thank you. You too. Stay cool over there. And thank you again, Brian, for presenting this morning. And thank you, of course, to Uprise Partners for yet another amazing season of IT Basics for Business. I learned so much this season. And for everyone who's on the call this morning, just know this entire season, as well as last season, all of those recordings are on our YouTube page for you to replay, share with your colleagues, your friends, to continue your education. So I'd also be remiss if I did not thank my colleague here at the Chamber, Riley Legier, for helping to produce yet another successful virtual event. Last but not least, a big thank you to each of you for attending today and throughout this season. If you're interested in learning more and continuing the conversation with Brian, because I know there's a lot more to learn, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with links to additional resources. And one final shout out to our sponsor, Uprise Partners, for their continued support and the contributions to IT Basics for Business. We look forward to seeing you back here in the fall for the 4th season of IT Basics for Business. All right, everyone. Thank you again for attending this morning. And remember to stay cool in this heat wave and just enjoy and have a wonderful summer. Bye for now.